is kind of written in a kind of like a code or like a song. So the meaning becomes really confusing. So you need a lot of resources to even figure out what they're talking about. For example, the 100 Rules of War I translated. The poem itself says a horse that's like 2 hands high. And you're like, what does that mean? 2 hands is not that big, but it means 2 hands above the standard size.
Welcome to Shugyo, reflections on the path to self-mastery and forging the way. My name is Adam Mitchell. I'm your host and fellow student along this path.
At Hoshino Coffee Shop in Nodashi, Japan, and I'm sitting here with my friend Eric Shahan. I've had the privilege of knowing Eric for 20 years now. I think the first time we trained together. We were actually just reminiscing about that. We've got some background noise here. We're at a cafe, so you're going to have to forgive. Oh, the coffee's coming right now. Apologize for any of the background noise. We got some jazz going on in the background. So Eric got himself quite a reputation for translating Japanese books on Budo and a lot of very hard to find books and documents that he's been able to discover and really understand how he comes to find these and what inspires him when he sees certain books, what inspires him to translate that specific book. I also would like to learn a little bit more about Eric's discoveries and how he's been able to expand his own martial arts understanding, his understanding of Japanese culture. Finally, I also want to learn more about the work that he's doing outside of Budo, what some of the goals that he has and what he's looking forward to maybe discovering out there. What would his sort of North Star be or the direction that he'd like to take all this? So, Eric, thanks for taking the time to sit down and talk.
Well, thanks for that very nice introduction, Adam. I appreciate that. And yes, I have been training with Adam for 2 decades. Originally, my plan when coming to Japan was just to try to, I was fortunate enough to get a job teaching English at a private English school in Japan. And they offered me a job as well as accommodation and, of course, a work visa. So my plan was to come and work for about a year. However, after getting to Japan, I really found that studying Japanese and, just walking around and checking out temples and shrines and stuff like that and seeing the different foods, I really became enamored with the whole area. So I extended my stay for first 2 years and then 3. And about the middle of the 3rd year, I figured, I'm never going home. So early on, I actually decided I wanted to try some martial arts. I'd never done martial arts before. And after a couple of false starts, I eventually discovered the Jininkan, and I was able to start training there. And after I started training martial arts, learning more about how Budo is taught and what Budo means, it really made it easy to stay, a long time in Japan.
Let's say more about that. What did, when you say Budo, what it means, like what was your discovery back then as far as the meaning that sort of gave you that direction?
Well, back when I was a kid, a lot of the people thought that, the way of the warrior was just like you were ready to commit seppuku or harakiri at the drop of a hat for your lord. But that was only something that happened in the Warring States period. It didn't really happen so often in modern society. So what our teacher taught us was that you have to focus on the fundamentals and train yourself rigorously. And maintaining that rigor was what the essence of our kind of martial arts was, the understanding the necessity to train fundamentals extensively.
Now, when you got here, you got a job, you're teaching English, kind of followed that pretty Western conventional path. Right. You ended up creating a family here.
Yep.
And what was your career path over the last 20 years here while living as a Westerner in Japan?
Well, it's never really left the educational realm. I've just decided that I'm going to use that as a base and expand on other avenues at the same time. The translation aspects that I started with have after a long time, I've started to provide a little bit of income. So that's going to, and I enjoy doing it. So it's going to be my main focus.
Cool. So let's step into that a little bit. You have to date translated, you just told me 80 books.
That's right. About 80.
And these are all definitely hard to find books, if not impossible to find books in the States or in the West. How do you find these books? Because I think regardless of where in the Budo world you are, when you come out with a book and we see it on Amazon, we've never seen it before. Right? This is like, most of this stuff is like, whoa. And you were just telling me, even like the families of some of these people are like, where did that, like, whoa, like this is really amazing. Right. So talk to me a little bit about like, what's your sourcing look like?
Well, I was very fortunate that we were all very fortunate that the National Diet Library began digitizing their collection. They digitized their entire collection and made it searchable by keywords. And even now, you can go on the National Diet Library of Japan, and search in English keywords. If you type it in, words like ninja are the same in English and Japanese. So you can type in that search and find books about ninja that are in the public domain and free to use. And anyone who wants to can, print those out and translate them. And that's basically what I do. I was primarily interested in jujutsu. So I would search the library for jujutsu books, print them out, and just start attacking them and going through them. And then while I was reading those books about jujutsu or kenjutsu, sword fighting, I would find something mentioned in there. Like another, this guy was a great swordsman, or this guy was a great jujutsu martial artist. So I would take that keyword and then search that, and that would connect me to other books. And that's how I got onto like the 12 Rules of the Sword by Ito Isai.
Great. I love that book.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting book. And I wouldn't have found that if I hadn't read that other book. And also Tsukahara Bokuden, the 100 Rules of War. I was able to track that book down initially through the Diet Library. And
So there goes my image of you like traveling around by backpack up in the Nagano Mountains looking for some like old historical bookstore, or like you had gotten tipped off that, I don't know, up in Sapporo or somewhere, there's a bookstore down some alley that, talk to this old man and he'll open a box for you. And that story doesn't.
To tell you the truth, that exists. That absolutely exists. And that exists right now. There are books like that just sitting there on the shelves. Unfortunately, they're like, $5,000 a copy. And so...
would there be a way for you to work a deal with the owner of that store to translate and give... Have you thought about that? And give it like partnership in it or equity in it?
I'm not very good at that kind of negotiating.
Got it.
So I have thought about something along those lines, but for now, I'm sticking with what is easily available, as in the online archives of everything scanned and nicely categorized with keywords.
Yeah.
That being said, there still is a little bit of legwork. So I still have traveled to other libraries to get copies of books, additional resources, as well as sent out, either called or sent letters to other libraries asking for copies of certain books to help with the translation. When I say help with the translation, that means the book is written in a very old Japanese script, and there's a somewhat younger but still old book that has a contemporary transcript of that. So with that contemporary transcript, I can basically figure out what's going on in the original manuscript. So while it's primarily using the digital archives, but there is still some legwork. They're not quite as exotic as pulling a great leather-bound book off a shelf.
Yeah. So some of your early work was pretty disruptive. There was a lot of, if you just kind of crawl around in some of the discussion boards within the ninjutsu community, a lot of the translations that you made available to the Western world raised a lot of questions, and there was a lot of conversation about it. Were you, what do you feel early on when you began your translation of some of those, the Fujita Seiko books? What were some of your, you did also the Ito book, right?
Right.
Yeah. What made you kind of sit back a couple times and go, okay, It made you really think and wonder and question. Was there anything in there that, I'm trying to find the right question, Eric, like, was there anything that really kind of made you wonder about how the history of the ninja had been told over the last, I don't know, since the 70s, and how you may be looking at it through a different lens now through your translations?
Well, you have to take a look at, it's easier to kind of look backwards than start in the back and go forwards, because, the ninja wear black, and they use shurikens, throwing stars, and they use poisons and stuff like that. And a lot of the things that are depicted, especially in those ninja movies in the 80s, came out of stuff that was available started becoming available in the 70s. The stuff that became available in the 70s was based on people like Gingetsu Ito, who published ninjutsu books in 1917 in Japan, which were very popular in 1917 Japan. So the fact that there was a boom at that time is a very surprising, it's an astonishing thing. Like, there was a ninja boom. Everyone was crazy about ninja in Japan, right around the time of the First World War. So, and they're way ahead of us. And then later on, Fujita Seiko picked up those same ideas and sort of repeated them and added his own research to those. And then those ideas then became what was the basis of the ninja lore, the ninja boom that started in the 70s, late 70s and early 80s. So seeing that those, for example, the way you use the sageo, the string on the end of a katana, hold one end in your mouth and use the scabbard to find an enemy. That was all
In the dark.
Yeah. That was all that was first associated in the ninja realm by Gingetsu Ito in those books before 1920. So that was very surprising. Also, with regards to sword fighting, just the incredible, the way all of those sword fighters, they used a lot of the terms that intermingle together. So it's not so clear where that concept originally, those concepts of, the one, Ito Isai had the one cut, but the one cut kind of originated before that. And anyway, there's a lot of, you see ideas and you're like, oh, this isn't where the idea began. It actually begins before that. So that kind of encourages me to dig back deeper to find the source of those original ideas.
And how are you digging back further?
Yeah, the problem with digging back further is that you have to kind of get better at Japanese. Since the Japanese, it becomes exponentially more difficult the further back you go.
Yeah.
Everyone kind of knows that if you pick up a book of Shakespeare, it doesn't really, you can kind of read it, but not really.
No.
You can kind of read it, but not really. You're like, what does this mean? What is this word? Why is he using a word like this? And then you see a note that this is a joke. Wait, this is a joke? Like, what is going on here? And so you get that it's like that with Japanese. Contemporary Japanese versus pre-war Japanese. And then when you get from pre-war Japanese and you go back another step to the early Meiji era, 1868, The Last Samurai, it kind of is like another Shakespeare. It's like another level of Shakespeare that is just as alien to the Shakespeare we know now. It's like one level back from there. And then there's yet another one of those when you go back into the Edo era. Oh. So your words no longer have the same meaning. A lot of it is kind of written in a kind of like a code or like a song. So the meaning becomes really confusing. So you need a lot of resources to even figure out what they're talking about. For example, the 100 Rules of War I translated. The poem itself says a horse that's like 2 hands high. And you're like, what does that mean? 2 hands is not that big, but it means 2 hands above the standard size. So,
how do you know that if you don't know that?
There's nothing to base it on. So I can read that this is the size of the horse, but what are they talking about? A miniature horse that you can fit in your pocket?
Yeah.
What does that mean? They're like, no. He recommends a standard horse, slightly larger than a standard size.
How were you able to figure that out?
I was able to get another document from another library that had some notations.
Wow.
It was an annotated version it was a what do you call it? It was a private press run book. It was a pamphlet that was not for sale. So it's got not for sale on it. That was done in the 1920s or something like that. That some kendo teacher, I think, distributed to his students.
Right.
And he had in there notations on what they mean. And I would never have been able to figure out what the meaning of some of those lines in the 100 Rules of War were, because I just had no idea what they were talking about. I mean, I could literally read what it says. I knew exactly what it said, but it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So that's an example of not being able to read something and still just not having any clue what they're talking about.
Wow. Out of the 80 books that you've translated so far, let's start wide and we'll go deep here. What book or a couple of books really stand out as something that you personally took away from with meaning? Not just a popular book that was, sold a lot but something that you personally felt this was impactful to, whether it be you personally, whether it be through your martial arts understanding or understanding of Japanese culture, but which of those translations or a couple of them really did you finish that project with a feeling of accomplishment and expansion?
There's definitely a lot of books I really enjoyed, especially when they're books by martial artists, like kind of the contemporary karate books I did. When I'm translating a book and the guy starts to sound like Manaka Sensei, then I'm like, wow, I think I'm on the right track here with this guy. This guy has something worthwhile to say, and I'm always happy when those elements come out. And it's usually something simple like concentrate on the fundamentals. You need to develop your awareness and things like that. And also, I would say the one I worked on with Manaka Sensei, which was the Fudo Chishi Myoruku, which talks about how to apply, mentally approach fighting. And one of the strongest images from that was the Thousand Arms Kannon, which is the goddess of mercy. It's a Buddhist deity with like 1,000 arms, and each arm has one item, and each item can be used in combat. But if you are, and that's a reference to yourself, you have all these techniques you can use. But if you only focus on one part of your body, the other 999 arms are useless to you. So seeing that, after I was able to translate that exact same philosophy appears in many other books, like a thread. And that has, I've found a lot. I've been confused about what an author was talking about until I realized it came back to that very fundamental concept of maintaining awareness over a wide space.
Not to overlap the question here, maybe it's a similar answer. The previous question being like, were there specific books that really moved you? And you answered that. But more direct, if we were to take the collective of all 80 translations and the collective of the work that you've done so far, how has that changed or impacted you as a martial artist or as a Westerner here living in Japan? Like what has been the movement that you would be able to zoom in on and say, yeah, that's directly a result of this body of work that I've done?
Well, as far as, are you referring to like how it's assisted other people?
No, I'm going to get to that, but I'm asking about you. Like, has there been, I mean, that's an enormous amount of information. It's an enormous amount of history. You've explained to me how it has increased your capacity for research and understanding, and you're like in threading that needle and trying to find the pathways of information and going to other resources, like the two hands, and being like, okay, all right. But how has the collective work that you've done, has it, maybe it hasn't, but how has it impacted you as a martial artist?
As a martial artist, well, first of all, I have to say that I've grown. I had a little bit of doubt about how I was going to approach translating. I was like, well, should I go there and translate that book? It's not really my forte. However, I've decided I'm just going to follow the flow of like information and take the path that it seems to be leading me. So in that respect, I've kind of relaxed about and just stopped spending so much time worrying about whether this book should be done or not, and just continuing along the line. It's also enabled me to kind of separate my mind into like tracks and stuff like that. So I'm focusing on this book on sword for a while and I get kind of stuck, I'd immediately just shift and could keep the same energy, but go off and follow the Jiu-Jitsu book or another book on like, Edo period comic books and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, and as far as martial arts goes, I don't know. I'm not sure how it has affected my martial arts. It's increased my desire to learn, the more elaborate styles of martial arts that are out there, like, horseback archery and stuff like that, But that's kind of a little bit out of the realm of possibility at present.
That's a good answer. I mean, you nailed it. It's like a lot of people, after spending decades in an art, they get kind of burned out, and they're like, they're realizing, hey, I'm not spending time with my children and they're growing up. It's impacting my relationship and relationships with family, career, all these other things. And they kind of move on, or they just get old and they're like, this is hurting. And to hear you say that it sort of motivated your desire to want to learn more is pretty interesting. That's cool, man. So a good segue is the Edo period comic books that you just mentioned. What other work are you doing in your translations similar to this, but outside of the martial arts?
I found one book I really found that was interesting was it was called How to Travel Safely in Japan. And it's a travel guide written in 1810. And the guy just gives basic travel advice for common people, not like just like everyday people, how to take a trip. Usually the trip was to like Ise Jingu or something like that, the big Ise shrine where everyone would do a pilgrimage once in their life. And it's got really, in some sense, it's kind of mundane. It's like how to put on your straw sandals properly, where to keep the money on your person. Make sure that when the porters are unloading your stuff from the horses, they don't drop anything into their pockets and stuff like that. And then it just, my favorite part about it is how it just straight up just talks about magic if it's just an everyday thing. Wow. Like if you're getting on the boat and you think the boat might be cursed, scoop a bit of dirt up from the ground and fold it inside a paper packet and put it in your pocket. Or if you become confused while you're along on a trail and you think that maybe a fox has been deceiving you, simply sit down, smoke a cigarette or two, or smoke some tobacco, because they probably had smoked in a pipe, and then let your mind reset, and the effects of the magic fox will dissipate and stuff like that. Yeah. So it was really quite a charming book. And I really liked there was just practical knowledge with just straight up just magic right in the middle of there, and then just back on the practical things.
That's pretty wild. You're also doing work in like the tattoo space, in the old tattoo space. You just said like comics and manga, Edo period stuff. Say a little bit about that. And is that just from personal interest? Is it, what drove you there? And what could we expect to see? You're like, I'd like to get into that space. I just haven't found the work out there yet. I haven't found the old book, but is there another space that you'd like to get into?
Yeah, the tattooing was I was interested in the punishment methods in the Edo era, because they were very, the Edo period was very safe for the general populace because they had very strict laws. Anything over, if you stole more than like 10 pieces of gold, they would just chop your head off. And if it was less than that, they would typically banish you, either short distance, middle distance, or to a distant island. And one of the things they would do as a kind of an additional punishment was a tattoo. They would tattoo you. So tattooing itself you wouldn't have a punishment of a tattoo. It would be banished and tattooed, or given a good beating, exiled out of the Edo city limits, and then tattooed. And the tattoo was to signify that you had received that punishment. And it was served as a warning to other people, hey, this is a bad guy. So I was interested in how that worked. So unfortunately, there weren't any books that dealt specifically with the tattoos that I could find. They were more general crime and punishment laws. So they're huge tomes that covered all kinds of legal, like land use and stuff like that. So I really had to search long and hard to find these little sections of the documents that described how the tattooing was done on criminals. And as it turned out, each area in Japan had its own specific tattoo for criminals. And it was sometimes on one arm, sometimes on both arms, sometimes on the face. And I just found that fascinating. And so I used that to write to compile a book called Tattoos as Punishment, which was the sort of the history of tattooing in Japan. And it had a section on early Japanese tattoos, the Edo era punishment tattoos, as well as a little bit on the tattooing that was done by the Ainu people in Hokkaido and the Ryukyu people, the Okinawan people.
This is all in one book, in one volume, or multiple volumes?
All in one volume. Uh-huh. And then after...
That must be huge in the tattoo community, I'd imagine.
There's definitely some people that... a lot of the information had been in other resources, and there are other a little bit more scholarly versions of that. However, mine included a lot of... I think a lot of stuff that people hadn't seen before. So there was... that was the big compliment I got from like tattoo artists and stuff like that. Like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there I've never seen before. So as a whole, it covered, it kind of overlapped a lot of other works, but there was definitely stuff in there that people hadn't seen before. So then from there, I'm isolating each type of tattoo now. So I found some more resources on the punishment tattoos with more explanation. I found a couple small books that talk about more details about the punishment tattoos. So I'm working on that. And I finished 2 volumes on Okinawan tattooing. And those were reports compiled. They're translations of reports that were written in 1890s up through the 1930s that I translated and published. And that's like 2 volumes that are pretty comprehensive that talk about, because there really weren't any research done before, like the 1890s, on Okinawan tattooing. There just wasn't. So that's really all there is. And I have one more volume to add to that. And then that'll basically be it for Okinawan tattooing, because there's nothing else. There's no other information really.
That's fascinating. When it comes to your martial arts translations, the books, is there something specific that you're looking for, or something that you like? Do you have like, that's a home run for me? I want to translate this book, or this topic. Is there something that you're really pointed towards?
Spear fighting. Yeah. There's lots of spear fighting manuals, but they're basically just pictures, and there's no descriptions of the techniques. So still searching for something that would, like a scroll that is detailed spear fighting, illustrated and with written descriptions of techniques. Because there's just not much about that I haven't been able to find.
How would you find that? And I think that I want to couple that question with, do you now, through the visibility of your work, do you have people outside of the public domain, but do you have people coming to you now saying, hey, I've got this rare document you might be interested in seeing. Would you like to partner on this, or would you translate it for me? Or, fill in the blank. Are you starting to see things and documents come out of the woodwork because of the work that you've been doing?
I've had people mention that they have documents, but that they're kind of keeping them for themselves. So, why are you calling me, man?
Right.
That's I got this document. Are you going to send it to me? Yeah. Sorry, I can't share it. Oh, all right. Thanks for getting in touch. I've literally had several people tell me they have documents related to this, some related to jujitsu or related to kenjutsu.
Yeah.
they have. It's very old and very rare. Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, can I see it? No.
So have you translated actual makimono, or are these mostly all books, like books?
Some of them are scrolls.
Yeah.
But a lot of the scrolls that I've translated don't really have any descriptions. It's just like a title. So it's not really, it's barely a translation. It's like just the, what do you call it? Like the name of the technique and maybe like one word or two word, like not even like a half sentence word of encouragement sort of thing. So I'd like to, I presume they exist, but because they seem to exist in sword fighting, like a detailed description of how the techniques are done, coupled with illustrations to make the translation a little bit easier.
So before we wrap this up, I'd like you to share some of the work that you're currently doing and what we can look forward to from you and some of the current projects.
So one thing is with the advent of some new translation software that allows you to
I was actually going to ask you about AI and if you were going to be using any of that, or if...
Well, there's AI in the sense that, nowadays you have things where you can use an application to take a picture of some Japanese road signs and they'll translate it automatically. They have some capacity to do that with old documents in handwriting. So right now, with that feature, I can start taking a look at some documents that heretofore I wasn't able to read at all. So using that scanning method on the really old documents with written in Japanese cursive, I might be able to open up a whole new frontier with documents, because there's just not many people that can read that old style script. And you mentioned before, trying to partner with people, and I'm not really good at that kind of negotiation. So I'd like to either try to dig up an old book that has a transcript of an old document, or see if this technology will allow me to kind of break out the meaning of those, what's written in those documents. So that's a little bit of a work in progress. If this technology progresses as it is, I might be able to just, translate some of these old scrolls that are publicly in the public domain. They're just indecipherable to me at the moment. As far as current work, I'm working on the third volume of the tattooing in Okinawa. I have some more Edo manga, which are about comic stories that are really sarcastic takes on modern society that were written during the Edo period. So these are the kind of things that people in Edo City would read. And people in Edo City were actually very literate, considering they weren't of the samurai class. They were kind of like merchant class. They were townsfolk, but they were actually quite literate, since they had enough money to go to the early temple schools. So it's nice to see the kind of stuff that the locals were reading at that time.
You were... Before we started recording, you were mentioning, we're having a conversation a little bit about this book on karate that you had translated, in the family and the current followers of this style of karate, which isn't, from what I understand, it's not as popular as a lot of the more sport-oriented karate, but they were very appreciative of your book. And was that accurate to say that they had communicated with you, or what?
I haven't gotten any directly from the family. You're talking about Motobu Choki, who was a very early, he was a man that introduced karate to mainland Japan in the early 1920s. And I didn't actually know who he was when I translated his book. So I thought because up until now, no one seemed to know the names of any of the people whose books I translated. They were all just sort of, even today, I don't even know when some of these people were born or when some of these people died, despite the fact that they lived in like the 1890s. However, this gentleman, Motobu Choki, not only is quite well known, his style is still being practiced today. Much to my surprise, I had no idea about that.
Here in Japan or abroad?
Abroad as well. They have locations all over the world. So I was quite surprised about that.
Your translation must have been very well received by them, I think is.
I think a lot of people were interested in the fact that I had I never done karate before. So it's like, I came at it straight and had no idea who he was. No frame of reference, so to speak. I just translated it as if it was I treat it as if any other translation. I want to see what this guy has to say. And I, went straight at it and translated it, went all the way through it.
That's pretty interesting because you have a big depth of knowledge with Budo.
Right.
So you're able to you're not just a regular translator who's looking to make a buck in translating a karate book.
Right.
But you're actually able to translate some of the more unique words properly.
Right.
I would imagine, right?
Yeah. So I approached him just as a guy that published a book on martial arts. I wanted to see what he had to say. So that's my approach to all the books. I want to see what the person has to say about a given subject. And that book ended up being really popular. I was like, why is this book popular? And after some more research, I was like, oh.
So that's kind of cool. So you go into pretty much every book with a curiosity, and that's what your choice is. You're not doing research on Amazon's analytics and seeing what's selling. And
No.
You're looking on Google and what's Google Trends, and you're not doing market research.
Actually, I early on when I did a series of books, it was one of the earlier series I did. You were kind enough to pick them up, the complete martial arts of Japan. There was Jiu-Jitsu,
those are great.
Gekken, and Kimbu. Yeah. And so when I finished those books, I contacted a couple officers. And they were like, "Oh yeah, can you send us like your market analysis of like books that are like this and how they sell and how much do you think these are going to sell and what percentage return you're expecting?" I'm like, I have no idea what any of this means, man. And also, I'm not doing that. But I'm like, I don't know. Thanks for your time. So there's no books on the books had spear fighting in it. I'm like, there's no spear fighting books out there. What are you asking me, man?
Right.
So, I haven't had any, that was my first and last attempt at getting a publisher.
But that's an really interesting point, is that you don't look at this as like what's trending and I'm going to go find a book and translate it. It's all based on your own curiosity.
Right.
That's cool. Before I hit the stop button, I just really want to take a moment and acknowledge, not just for myself, but take a moment and speak on behalf of a lot of the martial arts world, because I think what you've been able to bring to so many people in the English speaking world is a level of knowledge and understanding of traditional martial arts that they would not have ever had were it not for your time, your commitment, and all the work that you're doing. So I just want to acknowledge you for that and thank you for that personally. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that feel the same, and looking forward to continuing to read the translations that you do with a lot of gratitude. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate that. I just had another nice compliment just last month. A guy that I know from Hawaii was at a festival there, and he walked by there's an Okinawan table in Hawaii, and they had my tattooing books on Okinawan tattooings there. And the guy said, "Hey, I know that guy." And they're like, "You know him? Wow, we love these books." So that was that was quite flattering.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, Eric, thank you so much for your time and sitting down and having a coffee and talking about this.
Hey, always great talking to you, Adam.
Thank you. We got a dinner with Sensei to get to. So, all right, man. Take care.
All right, thank you.
Shugyo is brought to you by the Yasaragi Dojo, a traditional Japanese martial arts school and nonprofit 501c3 organization located in New York. I'm your host, Adam Mitchell, and I truly hope that you found some value and inspiration from this conversation. If you'd like to learn more about our dojo, yes, it's an actual physical dojo, not just some virtual one made up on the internet, find us on the web at yasaragidojo.com. The link is in the show notes. Or go ahead and access our free mobile app for iPhone and Android. There, you can access our daily training, coaching, live streams, meditations, workshops, and both online and in-person retreats. Our work depends on the generosity of our supporters, dedicated students around the world, and you by listening to this episode. So if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to this channel, and you'll be updated on new episodes and reflections as they roll out. And if you know someone who will enjoy the conversation that we had today, please go ahead and share. Once again, my name is Adam. This is Shugyo. Until next time.